You can hear I've got something. I've had it for since Friday night. Don't know if it's the flu or COVID or God knows what. But here we are. I want to talk to you about something that if you even mention it becomes controversial, but I can't help that. We now live in a world where, quite frankly, the Marxist left and the Democrat Party control the media, they control the culture, they control the rhetoric. And I won't lay down for this. I won't even lie down for this. Because the truth is the truth. Now, what do I mean by that? Let me start it this way. If you're a Marxist, you cannot be a practicing Jew or a practicing Christian or practicing anything. Because Marxism... we'll work on it. Because Marxism, by definition, rejects faith, rejects God, rejects differing points of view. Every Marxist regime, whether it's North Korea, Cuba, the old Soviet Union, the only so-called religious institutions they tolerate are those that they control and that support them. Other than that, no. And that is why many of these Marxist leaders want their photos placed in these churches and so forth. I just saw a report where Bernie Sanders is demanding that any aid to Israel be conditioned on basically destroying Israel. And in that report they said Bernie Sanders who's Jewish. Jamie Raskin is quoted all over the place, and Jamie Raskin, as well as another cabal of Marxists in the House who are Jewish, are demanding that Israel unilaterally cease firing. You got a guy by the name of Noam Chomsky, who in my view is a Marxist. He helped form one of these Jewish groups that you see in the Capitol a month or so ago and so forth, and they're Jewish by birth, but they're not Jewish in any other way. You have a guy called Thomas Friedman at the New York Times. I'm going to talk a little bit more about him a little later, who writes these unhinged columns. And when he writes them about Israel, they all have the same thread. It's repetitive. It's almost illiterate, yet he gets these Pulitzer Prizes. That the state of Israel shouldn't exist as it exists now, that if you elect anybody but radicals to that government, then the government's illegitimate and should be overthrown, and on and on and on. The same Thomas Friedman who was praising communist China not too long ago. If you're a Marxist, or if you embrace Marxism in one form or another, you cannot be pro-Israel. And Marx writes about violent revolutions. Violent revolutions. Overthrowing the status quo. Most Marxists are also anti-Semites. You might say, but some of them are Jews. I mean, Mark, you just talked about Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is one of the leading Israel haters in our country. Noam Chomsky insists on the destruction of Israel. Jamie Raskin's father, Marcus Raskin, was very close to the old Soviet Union. And I would argue he was a communist. And Mr. Raskin has been invited on here multiple times, and he's free to debate it. But his father was hard left. So when your worldview is not based on your faith, you're born a Jew, you don't have any control over being born a Jew or whatever you're born. When your worldview is based on a tyrannical ideology, everything else is secondary. In fact, nothing else matters. This is what I mean when I call some of these people self-hating Jews. Is Judaism an ethnicity? Is it a faith? What is it? In my view, it's both. And so if you're a Marxist, you're Jewish by ethnicity, by birth. But you're not Jewish by belief system. There aren't a whole lot of Orthodox Jews who are Marxists. Just aren't. And you can look at your own faith if you're not Jewish. You can see the same thing. Most truly faithful Catholics could never be Marxists. Most Marxists could never be truly faithful Catholics, and vice versa, and down the list. And so when I talk about self-hating Jews, I come under horrendous attack. Here I am, a person who loves his faith, who loves America. 2-3 weeks ago, there was an effort by Media Matters, which is now being criminally sued. I want to get into that later. Followed up by CNN, Mediaite, which is also founded by a Jewish gentleman, and others, that I was an anti-Semite. This is how it works. You need to understand. This is what Marxists do. By Marxists, I don't mean necessarily of the Karl Marx sort. I wrote an entire book about what I meant, called American Marxism. And these people, these self-hating Jews, fit very neatly into American Marxism. The New York Times has been one of the most outspoken media outlets, media corporations, trashing Jews and Judaism for over 100 years. And today is one of the leading media outlets undermining Israel's war against the Hamas Nazis. So when you teach this Marxism in colleges and universities, you're teaching anti-Americanism and you're teaching anti-Semitism. And when you combine that with the Islamist ideology, which really grew into about 40, 50 years ago, also on our college campuses and our universities, and also on places like MSNBC, there's an overlap. There's an overlap. Now, there's something quite nefarious going on. I look at this guy Blinken. We're told over and over and over again he's Jewish. Okay, great. Who cares? We're told over and over and over again that Thomas Friedman's Jewish. Bernie Sanders today, he's Jewish. Janie Raskin's Jewish. And none of them are strong supporters. None of them. Of Israel. Oh, they'll say they are, but they're not. If only Israel would give up Judea and Samaria. If only Israel would allow a two-state solution. If only Israel would get rid of their right-wing government and Netanyahu. If only Israel would be involved in a ceasefire right now. Provide fuel to Gaza. Provide food and medicine. If only Israel would do these things. If Israel did what they wanted, there'd be no Israel. Which brings me to my second point. When you think about what took place on October 7th and what's taking place today, you can see why the future's dark. Very dark. One of the Israeli spokesmen said, hey, look, in response to the 4 billionth question about civilians in Gaza, they voted for Hamas, so they have to suffer the consequences. Isn't that right? Isn't that what happened with Nazi Germany? mean, isn't that true? They installed Hamas. And there's a survey out here now, and I've posted it, that the vast majority of Palestinians support what took place on October 7th. So we're told there's this big gap between Hamas and Palestinians. But there's not. There's not this big gap. I didn't do the survey. So what are we supposed to do? Pretend that that's not true? And slice and dice up Israel? Based on a fiction? Who is this great Palestinian peace leader? Who is he? Who is their Martin Luther King? They don't have one. Be killed in 2 seconds. So they talk about the moderate Palestinian Liberation Organization, led by Abbas, who's a terrorist. Moderate. And they'll repeat that over and over and over again. They're moderate, they're moderate, they're moderate. They're not moderate, they're killers, they're terrorists. It was created by Arafat in the early 1960s. A killer, a terrorist who killed Americans, many Americans. So why is it our cause, America's cause, after all these years of mass murder, including of Americans, to create a brand new special country for the Palestinians? Based on what? The Israelis are fighting and they're dying. Their IDF soldiers dying. And one soldier who dies over there is like 10,000 here. It is a big deal. You don't hear any concern about their soldiers. Most of them, as I've told you before, are citizen soldiers. Nobody cries over their death. Never the Israelis ask, well, if you fight the war this way, aren't you going to lose more people? Nobody asks that question. Everybody knows what Hamas is doing in the Gaza Strip. Everybody knows that they want as many casualties as possible. They want video, and they're getting it, and they're giving it to the American media and the world media. And the American media and the world media are doing exactly what Hamas wants them to do, so more babies are dying and more people are killed as a result of it. And, of course, they don't take any responsibility for anything. Nothing. You don't give the enemy fuel and food and medical care. There are many Israeli leaders who even disagree with me. The fastest way to get this over with is to get it over with. The fastest way to save as many people as you can is to get it over with. You cannot allow people like Blinken, another self-hating Jew who appoints a boyhood friend as the envoy to Iran, and that boyhood friend brings in spies. That boyhood friend is selling out America to Iran. That boyhood friend just lost his classified clearance and nobody knows why. Blinken is the Biden whisperer, whispering in his ear. He's the one responsible for rearming Iran, which means rearming Hamas and Hezbollah and the rest of the Iraq terrorists. Blinken, who's following Thomas Friedman's columns. Nothing I'm saying to you is untrue. Nothing I'm saying to you is actually controversial. But they don't want to debate, they don't want to engage, and they don't want to discuss. They want to destroy. Well, I'm going to tell you what I believe, and that's the way it goes.